Hi all, thanks for taking time in this critical nap time, aka after lunch slot, to sit with me. I hope you all will learn something. I'm thrilled to be speaking here at LISA. My name is Emily Gladstone Cole, and I'm here to talk about how to be your security team's best friend. So do any of you actually work in security, either part or full-time? Yay, I'm seeing hands. Excellent. I hope that even you will also learn some new stuff. So why me? Why do you want to sit here and listen to me talk about ops and security? Well, I've worn a lot of hats over my career. I started out as a sysadmin, supporting SunOS, IRIX, DEC, a bunch of others, and then eventually Solaris and Linux and FreeBSD. So I'd spent a lot of time doing operations and handling incidents there, and then with the help of some security training from the SANS Institute, I made the jump from doing operations incident response to security incident response. And now I'm working in security full-time. I've done things like security research as well as that incident response, and now I'm working at Agari Data, which is an email security company, working on internal security there with the DevOps and infrastructure teams. Okay, so on to the interesting stuff. So the agenda, the introduction, a discussion for the Center for Internet Security's critical security controls, and then as many additional security thoughts as I have time for. This is a lot of material. I am probably going to be talking pretty fast. I do have some extra stuff at the end in case I talk too fast. And of course, the slides will be available online in case I'm talking too slowly and don't get to everything. Standard disclaimer, this is my work. It does not represent the opinions of my company. And also, non-standard disclaimer, I do hope you like cat photos. So if you want more than an overview of these concepts, I am very happy to talk about this stuff in more detail, either here, hallway track, or on Twitter. Obviously, conference hashtag is LISA18. And let's get on with it. So in case you didn't already know, the Swift on Security Twitter account is written from the perspective of Taylor Swift, millennial, pop star, information security expert. It's an account that has some silly content, but also has a lot of really great, relevant security content. And I think Tay nails this particular tweet. A lot of the day-to-day stuff that DevOps and SRE and operations and sysadmin teams is directly security related. For example, incidents, as I was mentioning earlier. If a website's down, you can't necessarily tell right away if that's a security incident or an operations incident. You need to do the same things for each. You assemble your team, you investigate, and you bring in more and more people as needed to get that problem solved, whether it's a security incident or just an operations issue. So I'm going to talk about a collection of best practices and all-around good ideas formalized as critical security controls that will sound themselves pretty much like some things that you're probably already doing in operations. So this talk is not the one neat trick that will shock and amaze your security team, but it is a discussion of the basic principles, things you're probably already doing, as I said, that your security team is going to appreciate. But don't just take my word for it. Rob Joyce, the former head of the NSA's Tailored Access Operations team, that's the nation-state hackers and defenders, gave a whole talk at the first USENIX Enigma conference in 2016 about how the NSA breaks into things, and he stressed that the basics are very important. The NSA tries to break in the easy way before they go do things the hard way and maybe burn a 0-day. So if you've made it harder for people to break in by doing a few simple things, then the less skilled hackers are probably going to give up and go away before you've been hacked. So the Center for Internet Security's critical security controls, which used to be the SANS critical security controls, has sometimes over time tracked the top 10, top 15, top 20 security controls. These are industry vetted guidelines for the security of your company and assets. I like the CIS guidelines because they do involve the community in writing them, and they do update them regularly. The critical security controls is just a fancy classification scheme for some basic security principles that I keep saying, can stop saying that word, but it is buzzword compliant, and sometimes when you're dealing with management, they do need buzzwords. Also, if you're planning on or you require a certification in one of those big compliance frameworks like PCI or HIPAA or SOC or FedRAMP or something else, these are all going to be things that you're going to want to talk about convincingly as part of that audit. So the three types, basic, foundational, and organizational controls, I'm mostly going to be sticking to those basic controls, but there are other important ones. One other side note, they do update the naming periodically and then the numbering as well as the industry decides which things are most important. So if you go and you look up the critical security controls somewhere else, like there's a great blog post from Rapid7, they have the old numbering scheme. This talk is about the numbering scheme that's on the website right now. So if you see discrepancies, it's because it's been updated. All right, so number one, hardware. Hardware asset inventory, yeah, hardware. Well, remember when I was talking about compliance frameworks, they also refer to hardware assets. But this item is still relevant even if you are 100% cloud. Everybody has to figure out where to draw the line personally for a hardware asset. Are they instances, containers? Yeah, you probably go along with me on that. ELBs, ALBs, VPCs, Lambdas. If you're paying, I mean, all my examples are Amazon, of course, so if you're paying Amazon for it, then you should probably track it somehow as hardware or software, and not just in the billing statement that maybe you don't review all the time to make sure that you're actually paying for all the things you need. So that's a bunch of lionesses and cubs, isn't it? You don't want to lose track of one. Could be bad. They might go and eat a tourist or something, and not a good thing. So have an inventory. Let's think how helpful it'll be to your security gal. She comes with you. This IP, I don't know what's going on with it. Can you tell me? I got an alert. And you can either tell her what it is right away, or even more importantly, give her a tool that she can use and look up that IP without even having to bother you. Because we're talking about on-call alerts and alert fatigue. If I can help myself without having to bug you when you're in the middle of something, it's a win-win for all around. One small note though, it's not all security gals. There are also some non-binary security folks, and there are even out there a few security guys. So just, keep that in mind. Okay, well, so you want to know how many systems, instances, containers, VMs, etc. you have for any number of reasons. You want to know when it's missing, when it's broken. You want to be sure you're billed properly for things, and you're managing your hardware life cycles, and also it's important for security. So let's talk about some ways that you can automate that. How do you know what's on your network through your automation? Well, if you're using DHCP, for example, or in your office you got your wireless access points, you can take the logs from that, compare those assets to your database, and automatically add any new devices. You can also do periodic scanning. There will be more about scanning later. And let's see, you also want to make sure that your assets are in a known state, like just up or down is one thing, but yeah, is this one actually, yes, it is staging, or oops, we used it in production. That might be a thing that you can use your automation suite to monitor and track, but you really want to make sure that you know if something goes down and if it's expected or unexpected. So just, keep an eye on things. And when your security gal says, hey, 20 instances went down at 6 a.m. this morning, is that expected? And you can say, yes, that's part of our process. So do keep track of these things in a way that somebody can come in and check on. You don't just want to put it into a spreadsheet, although Excel is probably the #1 most popular tool of the security engineer. It's still not the best first place to go. You can use your cloud management tools, of course, to keep track of your cloud assets, although it can get more and more complicated if you have multiple AWS accounts or AWS and Azure and Google Cloud. Something that's searchable that your security team can get to without having to distribute is going to be really important, because as your company grows, your security person is not going to be as embedded into all of your engineering efforts and isn't going to know about everything as soon as you do, new systems coming on board and so on. So finding a way to keep track of them so that other people can also figure this stuff out is really great. Software inventory, we were talking about the hardware-software divide. You have to figure out for yourself what counts as what. If you have dependencies in your software, you're going to want to know what those are. You're going to want to keep track of this stuff. If your security gal is investigating an incident, it's really helpful if you can just tell her right away, oh, well, yeah, we should be running these 5 things on this server and that's it. So if you're seeing anything else, that's bad. Also, if you get a vendor vulnerability report and I can turn to you and say, what software do we have installed? Are we running this vulnerable thing? Are we running, last couple of weeks ago, it was libSSH. And I had to turn to my infrastructure team and say, are we running it? And had to go through the exercise of going through a bunch of different tools to find it. If you can centralize all of that into one place, it will make your security gal's life a lot easier. She won't have to spend as much time tearing her hair out. Not that I speak, well, no, I totally speak from experience on that one. So the kinds of things that you're probably going to want to know, or that I am definitely going to want to know about your software is, as I said, what is already running on your network. And yeah, your automation suites can help you track this, or your anti-malware, or your endpoint protection, or a vulnerability management tool can also track this. Who installed the software? Do you expect software to be installed by people on production, or should it always be installed by your Puppet, your Chef, your Ansible, whatever? Knowing that kind of behavioral stuff will help me figure out what's going on if software suddenly starts showing up in my reports. Oh, I want to know how to get there. Also, another thing about that, limiting the number of people who can install software is a part of least privilege, and it also will help in a security context. And finally, what does the software do? Now, maybe you have your endpoint protection suite has some kind of behavioral component. Maybe it's got some sort of machine learning going so that it knows what a tool is supposed to be able to do and not supposed to be able to do. So it'll know that if suddenly something starts, calling out to a particular IP address and port every 37 minutes, that maybe, that's something that somebody needs to take care of. So knowing what the normal behavior is also important. One final note on software and expiration dates. Please track those too. If you run out of a license of some infrastructure critical tool and you suddenly can't do your builds anymore, obviously that's bad. And domains and SSL certificates, I think probably everybody's heard about somebody who lost control of their domain. They allowed it to expire. Somebody who's allowed their SSL certificate to expire. It just looks bad if you have an expired SSL certificate, and it could potentially lead to domain issues and fraud. Excuse me, potentially loss of information. So how do you deal with the software issues that you might come up with? Remember when I was talking about security gal worrying about a vulnerability announcement from a software vendor? Continuous vulnerability management is the way that I'll keep from getting too nervous about this kind of stuff. So part 1 of this is scanning. Number 1, logos. So logos create buzz. The first one that I can remember coming up as a big security incident with a logo was Heartbleed in 2014. And since then, there have been any number of others. If you saw the keynote, Spectre and Meltdown. Tech publications and bloggers and journalists really, really love if you already have a cute name and a logo. So it's going to attract a lot of attention if you name your vulnerability, although if you talk to the security people, they might argue with you whether something deserves to have a logo or not. But they get more attention. Let's see. You do want to scan regularly. One thing I will say, though, is weekly vulnerability scans are recommended, but if you're not going to be able to patch if something comes up in those scans, unless it's oh my gosh, the internet's going to explode type of thing, think about the stress that you're causing your security team by not patching. And I can't say scan less often, but remember that you can't just scan, you've got to patch as well, which is coming up in a minute. Authenticated and non-authenticated scans, pretty straightforward. An authenticated scan is a scan that starts inside your perimeter, so to speak, if you even have a perimeter nowadays, which is to say it has a valid username and password. Non-authenticated is coming in blind. It doesn't know how to log in. It just has whatever your endpoints are, and it looks at those. It's important to do both because you want to see if there are any vulnerabilities for somebody who's coming in from outside. If they happen to get a username and password, you also want to be sure that they can't see other people's data, other customers' data, or possibly get farther into your network if they just have the username and password. So the authenticated ones, you make sure that they are not elevated privilege accounts, because that will kind of give you some more worrisome results in your test. And the next part of that is risk. So threat plus vulnerability equals risk. There's a lot that you can talk about with risk. Without an understanding of risk, you can't say whether vulnerability is no risk because, hey, you're not running that software at all, or low risk, which is you're running it on a network with a lot of access protections and you can't just log into it from anywhere, or worst, high risk, oh, we're running on an internet-facing IP. So think a lot about the risk. You'll probably want to develop a risk management program, but that is a completely other talk. So we're not going to go into it any farther, just keep it in mind. So the second part of continuous vulnerability management is patching, as I was referring to earlier. You want to be sure that you are addressing the most serious vulnerabilities first. Although it is great to do a quick win and patch something when it comes up, if it is a low or informational level risk, you are probably not doing your company too much of a benefit. You really need to, your company is just about as insecure as it was before you patched that one thing. Always start with the high ones and work your way down. That's the way to keep your company most secure. Obviously, you can use your automation suite, whatever that might be, to push your patches out, although I definitely recommend trying to do that in a test environment first and running all of your automation suite and your CI/CD with the new versions of the software before you roll them into production. It's a lot harder to roll back in production if you've made a mistake. So yeah, next one is controlled use of admin privileges. Not everybody needs admin privileges. Not everybody needs to be able to log into production. So every time you keep the ways that people can get those higher levels of privilege restricted and log the attempts to escalate privilege, you are making your company safer. One thing I've liked a lot, especially for Windows AD environments, is creating completely separate user accounts for administrator level work versus user level work, and have people just log in normally as the user and only become the administrator level user when they have to do administration. It cuts down a lot on accidental exposure because everybody clicks on things they're not supposed to, even the admins, even the experienced security professionals. And if they're clicking on those things from a position where their administrator credentials are not compromised, then your organization's a lot safer. Okay, well, how do you automate this? You use groups and roles. All of your, all humans are unique, but not all accounts need to be unique. You can build up roles: engineering, QA, DevOps, SRE, infrastructure, security, et cetera, engineering team A, engineering team B. Once you got your company to the level where you have more than one kind of engineer, where you've got a formal split from DevOps and QA and engineering and so on and so forth, cutting down those privileges in slow and non-painful steps is a really, really good thing. I kind of want to say yes, just very slow steps, because otherwise people will start complaining and you may have to you may have more backlash than you'd hoped, and you may have to roll back and give people more privileges than you really want. Functional names for your groups. So it's a lot easier to know immediately and not make any mistakes in what level of privileges you're granting if you have useful, aka longer, names in your groups. So like sec logging read only, it's pretty obvious that it's the security team and it's about logging and it only has read-only access to things. versus a group that's simply called logging. You don't know already what kind of things that one has access to, and it's easier for people to just say, oh, logging here, and give somebody more privileges than they need. So try to keep those kinds of things in mind. Okay, a few notes about passwords and passphrases. Some horror stories since it's almost Halloween. Yes, thank you. I'll just kind of put these up here because I am running short on time. But all of these things have happened either at companies where I've worked or companies where friends of mine have worked, and working to fix that has been some of the fun that I have had. Okay, let's see here. Secure default configs. If you're secure as you can be by default, you've reduced the attack surface and the amount of late night stressing your security team is going to be doing. How do you do that? There are a lot of great security standards. The Center for Internet Security has one. DISA has its STIGs. NIST has some other guidelines as well, and there are a bunch of others. And just start with one of those. You'll need to customize it for your environment, but you want to make sure that you can start somewhere rather than starting from scratch. Obviously, you can use your automation suite. Oh, yes, right. Don't install software you don't need to run on your systems. I asked my friends on Twitter the other week if it was a good idea to, or they thought it was a good idea or bad idea to run GCC in production. It was actually mixed. Some people said, well, once they're on my system, they can just, bring the binaries over, and there's a certain amount of thought that says, well, but you still don't want to have it on there if you don't need it. I'm personally on the don't install it unless you think you're going to need it on a regular basis on production. It just means that you have more bugs that you need to pay attention to fix. Okay, so yes, use your automation config tools to enforce whatever security policies you have. And if you don't update your gold images that you have periodically, you may run into the problem where the first however long that something is in production, you have to spend patching it, and it's not actually as secure, and obviously that's bad for your network. So policies versus automation and configuration is something you're going to want to think about as your company grows, rather than just having a policy that says always run your firewall. You're going to want to have that as a standard and use your automation suite to do that for you. Okay, logging. We love logging. Log all the things. So it used to be a lower priority, this control, but I'm so glad that it is now a higher priority. Otherwise, this talk would have been the basics, plus another couple of things that are important. So you do need to figure out what your critical logs are, your security devices, your applications, everything on that. Since I'm running short on time, outbound traffic, especially from your production network, is a really good place to start. You can find misconfigurations there, and also maybe that's where the security team can find some interesting stuff to dig into. But better if they can't, and you've already got all of that stuff figured out and restricted. Okay, well, there are 14 others. Obviously, your company will want to think about all of these and figure out, and there's lots on all of these on the CIS website. You'll definitely want to think about my top next one is data protection. It's been in the news a lot lately, and your timer has stopped, so I am not sure. 1 minute. Okay, so there's a lot about data protection. You be sure to check GitHub using a tool like Trufflehog or something like that for any of this interesting information that can give somebody access to your network or more information on your internal configurations than you want. S3 buckets. Fortunately, there are a lot of ways that you can make sure that your your S3 buckets are secure. You just need to use them. There's more, but we're going to skip over all of that. Tech debt. Please address your technical debt. I love this comment from Monkey User. And summing up. Okay, so keep an inventory of whatever you can, hardware, software, however you define hardware versus software. It'll help your security team a lot. It'll help your operations. It'll help lifecycle management. It'll help keep your costs down if you use and review that. Perfect security can be hard, but the basics aren't. And please, don't blame the users for the security issues. Write better tools for them instead, or buy better tools from them instead. Everybody's going to click on things. So you're probably already doing most of these things, and if you're not, it's a good place to start so that you can be your security team's best friend. So.
Let's give a hand.
Yeah.
We can take one question.
If anybody has one.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, within how can also like your security team contribute back to the ops space as well?
So the security team can work with the ops team to help raise the priority of things that both groups think are important. Maybe your operations folks have been wanting to keep better track of the instances and so on, while your security team can add on to that. And usually people are a little bit more trained to listen to the security folks. And you can, so working together, you've got a lot more oomph within the organization, shall we say. And you got, I don't know, how to put this. Let's actually take this offline because I don't want to take up too much time. I know we have somebody coming up next.
Fine with me.
So,
Thank you.
thank you. Awesome.
All right, another round of applause for our speaker.